Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Hello, I'm Colonie Town Judge Peter Crummey, and welcome to Benchmark. We'll explore a variety of issues involving our justice system, our legal system, and how they intersect with the citizens of the town of Colonie. Today, we are truly fortunate to have as our guest Judge Margaret T. Walsh, Albany County Family Court Judge. Judge Walsh has been serving the citizens of the County of Albany since 2005 as one of our family court justices. And welcome, Judge Walsh. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me here, Peter. And please call me Peggy.
Well, I'm thrilled to do so, Peggy. And there's so many cases and types of cases that involve our family court. And it seems to me, Judge, that your caseload and the caseload of family court throughout the state of New York is increasing geometrically. And as a result, it certainly calls on you to handle more and more cases each year involving so many matters involving families and children. And I think today would be a great opportunity for all of us to get from you your insight as to our family court system and especially how it involves our children. How do young people get involved in your court system?
Well, most of our cases are custody cases. So most often I see children who are involved in the disputes between their parents over the custody, over their custody. So that's probably the biggest number of cases that we see. Also, abuse and neglect, unfortunately, makes up a tremendous amount of the time that I spend with children. We have cases involving juvenile delinquency where children commit crimes. They're acts of juvenile delinquency. They would be crimes if the children were 16 years old or older. But because they're children, we consider them not to have the capacity to commit crimes. So we call them acts of juvenile delinquency. Then there are children who come to court in a proceeding called a person in need of supervision. And those are kids who are truant or they're beyond the control of their parents. It might be because they're not only not going to school, but not coming home when they're supposed to, staying out all night or longer, doing drugs, alcohol, being involved with the wrong kinds of people. And so their parents or the school district will file a petition against that child to bring them to court and to try to get some services in place, like the probation department and some counseling services also.
Well, it seems to me, Judge, that actually you're seeing so many cases in your court system of people who are actually too young to be in the criminal court system that I preside in, but still involved in activity which may otherwise be considered a crime but for their age.
That's exactly right. We have a lot of them. We have the kids, you see them when they're 16, we see them when they're younger than 16, but they're doing the same, their behavior is the same a lot of times. I mean, it's assault, it's theft, it's everything that adults are charged with, children can be charged with as well. But the penalties are different. Of course, we don't put children in jail. We try to get the children's services, get the family services. Often children don't commit these crimes in a vacuum when you consider the child's behavior alone. It has a lot to do with the family often. And so it helps a lot to get the family involved with the child, to make sure that the family is supervising the child properly, getting the child to school, and making sure that the child is not in a position where he or she can commit these acts that are so detrimental to our society and to them and to their families.
So, Judge, oftentimes in cases such as these, are they put under, sometimes are the children put under the supervision of probation in some way or another, and what kind of services does probation provide for handling these young people?
We often release children under the supervision of probation when they come to court initially. Of course, we also have the opportunity to, if we need to, send them to the shelter or send them to our Capital District secure facility if we believe they're a danger to the community or that they'll run away and won't come back to court. But often we release children under the supervision of probation, and the rules are that they have to do what their parents say. Ultimately, that's the big one. We make sure that they understand that if they're not doing what their parents say, they're also violating a court order. And that tends to get their attention a bit, because then if they don't do what their parents say, they stay out beyond curfew, they don't go to school, then we can bring them back and then reevaluate whether they can stay in the community or have to be sent to a shelter. So then probation will try to connect the family and the child with services. Often it's alcohol and drug abuse related, and they can connect them with that sort of services, mental health services, and that sort of thing that can be tremendously helpful to get a child away from the behavior that brought him to court.
Well, Judge, it seems to me, though, over just in the time that you've been on the court at Albany County Family Court, that the number of cases just continues to grow, and it's like so many of our other court systems where it appears to be standing room only as you move forward. Have you found the nature or the style of the case changing at all since you have been serving as one of our family court judges in the alleged behavior or the conduct of the natural parents? Is there any kind of evolution of the types of cases that you've seen so far?
Well, what I notice is that the files that we have on children who are PINS kids or come in with JDs usually contain, not always, certainly not always, but very often contain petitions that have been brought in the past against their parents for neglectful behavior. So that tends to be a trend, that these kids are often unsupervised because their parents potentially have drug problems. So it's often a family problem. It's often a family problem. Certainly not always. I mean, kids often act out in ways that have nothing to do with their parents' inability to take care of them, but it is the child's, something that's happening with the child himself. So
you can even sense that oftentimes the environment within which a young person is exposed can have an impact on how they proceed in life as well. I know that in our own criminal court, routinely now I'm seeing cases and allegations of theft crime by the parent, but in the presence of the child who is with them. And then there may be an additional charge of endangering the welfare of a child at the same time. But oftentimes criminal conduct is being committed in the presence of a child as well. And what kind of mark could that make on that young person as well as they grow?
Right, just as you would suspect. Just as you would suspect. And it's not only criminal conduct that parents perpetrate in front of their children, but a lot of times it's domestic violence too. And so kids are exposed to that. And it's much more traumatic, I think, than parents realize because they're so involved in what's going on between themselves that they don't realize that the child who is exposed to it is really suffering trauma, because it's very upsetting, of course. It's not only the physical violence that happens, but also the emotional violence, abuse that happens between parents, and it destabilizes children, and they don't know what's going to happen next, and often the police are called, and one parent or the other is taken away. And so those are the problems that really have to be addressed. When we talk about our juvenile delinquency system, it's not only the children. It's certainly not only the children. It's the families that have to be, that we have to think about as well.
Judge, you pointed out that some of the cases involving children involve their abuse or their neglect. How do you protect the child in the court system? What tools do you have as a family court judge to protect the rights and the interests of the child?
That's a good question. That is our job, of course,
right,
to protect the child. And there's always a balance. How do we protect the child? How do we maintain the child at home if we possibly can? We issue orders of protection directing the parents to do certain things or refrain from doing certain things so that we can have the child at home and not take the child away and put the child in foster care. But very often we don't have a choice, in the sense that we believe the child would really be at risk if he or she were left at home. So we have foster care, and we have a lot of children. Actually, now we have, I believe, about 260 children in foster care. I think about 89 of those, just to be clear, are PINS kids and juvenile delinquents who are in residential facilities. But the rest of those kids are in foster homes or group homes, and those are children who are there because their parents can't take care of them. So we have an enormous number, I think, of children who are unstable because foster care is, by its nature, temporary, and they don't know where they're going to be in the future. They don't know whether they're going to be home. They don't know whether they're going to be adopted by the people they're living with. They don't know whether neither of those things is going to happen, and that ultimately they'll be out on their own and responsible for themselves. So we try to find the right place for them. temporarily, and then we try to plan for them. And we're mandated to see these children at least every 6 months, kids who are in foster care. And now we are mandated, and I think it's a great thing, to consult with these kids. And we have what's called age-appropriate consultation. So little children don't have to come to court, but 7-year-olds and kids who are older than 7 are generally, they're not required to come to court if they don't want to, or if they have some kind of mental health or medical issue. They certainly don't have to come to court. They're represented by attorneys who really do for us judges, what the children would do, which is they tell us what their clients want, and that's very helpful. But the best thing is when kids come to court and they can tell me what they want and how things are going. And I think it's helpful. I should just back up and say that this change came about requiring us to actually see the kids, because older children in foster care would say, have come out and said that they have felt very disconnected and isolated from the process by which decision makers are really, charting the course of their lives, and they had no input, or no input that they felt was serious or being taken into consideration. So now we see these kids all the time, and it's a very good thing. It helps us make good decisions, I think.
And oftentimes, Judge, I'm sure that the testimony of the child or the position of the child could be tempered with other adults in the room or their natural parents in the room. Do you ever have opportunity to actually meet with the child outside of the parents in order to best discern what's really on the child's mind?
Yes, and it's an interesting logistical problem, because the parents are entitled to be at the permanency hearing as well as the children. So if we think that the children should not be in the presence of the parents, then we separate them. I mean, we do it, we sort of bifurcate it and have the proceedings at 2 different times. And sometimes it can be a near miss, and so we have to be very careful about that. And there are other times when children want to be in court with their parents, and sometimes it's because they miss their parents and they want to go home and they just really want to see them. And then other times it's because they really want to talk about what they perceive their parents have done to them, and they want me to know how they feel about what happened to them and why they ended up in foster care, and they want their parents to be there, which is extraordinary and very brave, I think, for little kids and even teenagers to come to court and say, this is what happened to me, this was my experience, and this is what my mother did, and I don't ever want to go back to see her. And of course, there are kids who just say, look, I want to go home. And I know that they can't because their parent is not able to take them home. But they say it, and I think that they feel better at least telling me, because I'm the person who makes the decision, how they feel and why they feel that way. And I think it's helpful for them to at least be present and let me know what they think, and know that I'm hearing them and that I care about them and that I want the same thing for them, and we're going to try to have it happen.
Right. So you have occasion, too, to conduct in-camera or private consultations or interviews with the child, even though they are recorded. Is that correct, for potential appeal?
Right.
But sealed nonetheless.
Right, that's true. The permanency hearings I was just talking about are an open court. It's when the kids come in with their lawyer. There's a lawyer from the Department for Children, Youth, and Families, and as I said, sometimes the parents, sometimes not. But when I have these in cameras, they're in custody cases. And they're called in cameras because it used to be that the judge would just take the child into a room like chambers, and we would have stenographers who were mobile, so they could just bring their equipment into the chambers. But now we have recording devices, which are in the courtroom, so the in cameras actually takes place, in the courtroom. I don't wear my robe and I don't sit on the bench, but I sit near the child and his attorney. And I tell the child that I won't tell his or her parents anything. I can't tell, and I'm not allowed, in fact, to tell anybody what has happened. And it seems to make them feel comfortable, generally speaking, I would say, to know that they can speak freely to me, knowing that the only people who might ever hear this are some other judges in the future in case there's a question, which is to say, in case there's an appeal, then the appellate court will have the benefit of the recording of the in-camera. But under no circumstances do the parents or their attorneys ever have that. So kids tell me what they think, and children are a very good source of information about them. So it's very helpful to me to hear from children about what it's like at home, what it's like with dad, what it's like with mom. And it's a great experience, I think, for them too, to at least be able to say, this is what I want, and this is why. And sometimes there are good reasons, and sometimes for little kids they're not such good reasons, but it's up to me to decide what's in their best interest, and I just want to know what they want and why. It's helpful to get that information.
What I'm finding in my own courthouse that so much of the criminal matters that come before me are, there's an underneath addiction. Do you find addiction to have an impact on your own caseload as well?
I do, on all of it, really on all of it. It has an impact on the custody cases because so often parents are unable to take care of their children and grandparents or other relatives step forward. Right. Of course, the abuse and neglect cases are often involve parents who are addicted to drugs or alcohol, and we're fortunate to have a family treatment court and a juvenile treatment court, for that matter, in our courthouse, and that's it's what's called a problem-solving court. So it's a time when families come to court, a respondent in a neglect proceeding, say, and they get treatment. They come to court every week, and they get treatment. It's monitored every week, and so it's a very intensive way of getting them back together with their children. So, but there's a lot of it. There's certainly, it's very, very destructive.
Well, you're not kidding, and I think it's strangling the criminal justice system, in my opinion. In so many ways. Tell me this too, Judge, you've mentioned abuse and neglect cases. Can those cases ever evolve into a termination of parental rights? Does that happen?
It does happen.
From time to time?
It does. It happens all the time.
Okay.
It happens all the time. And really the question is, should it happen? A lot of times it should happen sooner than it does in certain cases. Because children spend a lot of time in foster care, and they shouldn't. If children should be back with their parents, they should be back with their parents, and
Right.
we should be doing that a lot faster. We should be getting services in place faster so that kids can go back to their parents. And if they can't go back to their parents, then we should be moving a lot faster in our court proceedings to make sure that children are not spending so much time in foster care. Because it's so destabilizing, because kids don't know where they're going to be. They don't know who's going to be taking care of them for the rest of their lives. And so it's a tremendous concern. It's a concern around the country, really, but specifically, I should mention, in our state, there are 17 counties, the 17 counties with the largest populations of foster care, and unfortunately, Albany is one of them. We are now involved in a child welfare court improvement project, and that is what's called a cross-systems approach to trying to reduce this problem of children spending so much time in foster care. So we will involve everyone in the community who has the ability to change our current practices and policies. So we have our local senator, assemblyman, county executive, the county agencies that are involved. We have researchers from SUNY and other schools, other universities in our area, and it's going to be, I think, a very interesting project, and it's meant to last for a long time because we're all stakeholders in what happens to our children, and so we're all going to be working on this and trying to come up with a better system of foster care, a better system of getting kids out of foster care in a more timely way and getting them permanency so they have parents or a parent who will take care of them for the rest of their lives.
Well, I know the project is off to a good start here in Albany County, and I know you're leading the charge in that way, and I know that means that it will be a great success. And actually, Judge, what it does is it continues to expand your role as a community leader and having a positive impact on the community, even outside of the courthouse.
Well, in general, I think that is the trend. I think you're right, that we as judges are not to just adjudicate cases. We are supposed to try to find or help to find solutions to the problems that bring people to court. That is really our role in the community, not just to bang our gavel and say, okay, this case is over, but to really figure out why we have so many cases, why we have so many children in foster care, so many juvenile delinquency petitions, so many PINS petitions, so many problems in our community to try to solve those. And so I'm involved in other judges are also involved in other groups in our community. We have a group that is involved in our Albany City School District. We have the school district, we have the principals of our high schools, middle schools, and everyone involved in the school community, including our probation officers, our Department for Children, Youth, and Families. Everyone who, again, is responsible for changing the policies and practices that we have. They're all at the table at the same time so that we can figure out what it is we're doing wrong, and in some instances what it is we're doing right, and focus on the things that we think need to be changed so that we reduce these instances of violence in our schools and truancy. And so it is something, I think, that is more of a trend for judges to be more involved in the community and try to help solve the problems
Well,
of our
you're
community.
doing that so well already, and we're very fortunate in Albany County to have you continue to bring these efforts forward in the face
Thank
of
you.
the incredible caseload that you're being asked to manage every year on behalf of the citizens of the County of Albany, and as part of the integral part of the state court system. You know, our work sometimes does intersect in a variety of cases. I know that you brought up domestic violence before, and that is certainly a very large part of what we manage here in the Colonie court system as well. So many cases involve arrests involving domestic violence, and I'm called out routinely in the middle of the night to manage those matters as well, and to issue orders of protection, which your own court does routinely as well. And oftentimes we find that cases are pending in the Albany County Family Court, and now also in the Colonie Criminal Justice Court. And sometimes as I try to think about how to, if we could ever have an opportunity, we see these same families kind of crossed up in the criminal court
Right.
and also in the family court.
Right.
I don't know if you've also noticed that, and whether there's any ideas that you've noticed that may be of assistance as we all move forward in trying to bring justice to the citizens.
Right. It really does require a collaboration between all of the parties who are involved. You know, the public defender, the district attorney, the people who are in family court. And people who bring family offenses in our court do have the opportunity to bring them in both the criminal court and our court. So we often have a charge in your court, criminal charge in your court, and a family offense proceeding in our court. But you and I and other local judges can work cooperatively because we can modify each other's orders of protection if we need to. For example, you might issue an order that directs a person to stay away from another person, and then they come to my court and say, but we have to see the kids, and we have to exchange, or at least talk about exchanging the children. And so your order will allow me to change that order so that I can make a provision for, you know, the mother to see the children and have the father bring the children to her, for example. So we do have a lot of the same.
Well, there's no question in that way, and I see, and you have some similar tools too to get the attention of a party that is maybe supposed to be in your court at a certain day. I know that you could issue warrants as well to compel the delivery of somebody to the courthouse.
That's
which
true.
Is very similar to what we do here in the criminal court as well. And have there been some opportunities during your involvement with children that you've come to, that a particular child actually weighed in with their own testimony to the point where it had an overwhelming impact on the direction of the case, or of the adjudication of the case, or the way that you ultimately decided a particular case?
It happens more frequently than I would have thought, that a child says something to me that makes me look at the case in a completely different way. And it happens in custody cases, and it happens because, of course, in custody cases, people are arguing about what kind of time they're going to have with their child. And sometimes the child just says whatever he or she is thinking, and it makes sense, and it gives me a good idea of what the dynamics really are between the parents, and it helps me to help the parents resolve the problem, which is really what I prefer to do, is help them resolve their custody issue as opposed to my making a decision for them. So that happens from time to time in custody cases, and certainly in foster care cases where I have kids come in and tell me how they're doing. And I had the other day I had a pair of kids, teenagers, come in, and their caseworker wanted to put them in a foster home, and there was only room for one of them in the foster home. And I said, well, why don't you go, and we'll keep looking for you and, you know, the other one. And they said no, because they would rather stay in the group home together, because they were 2 of 8 children, and the other 6 children had been adopted by other families. And they hadn't quite lost touch with them. They're still able to see them, but their lives were so different now that they knew that they couldn't lose each other. They just had to stay together. And so we're working on doing something different for these kids. We're working on having a different plan for them. And it's because they came to court and they said, this is what we want, this is what we think our plan can be. And I agreed with them. They need help. putting it in place, of course, but that's what we're here for, and that's what the caseworkers are there for. So we're working on what their plan is, and it's a better plan. It's really a better plan than what the adults had come up with. So that happens. And this was actually about a year ago now, but I do always think of, what if that kid hadn't come to court, this kid who was in foster care, who was 8 years old, and was asked how things are going. Well, things were going okay, but his behavior was really not that great. And what he said was that he didn't want to be adopted by the person who everyone had planned was going to adopt him. And I asked him why not, and what, and he said, well, I like those other people that I used to live with. He had been in foster care before. And so he'd been in foster care, then returned to his parent, then taken from his parents and placed with this new family. And he said, I want to go back with them. And I was pretty shocked. I didn't know anything about these people, and his attorney was surprised to hear that too. And the caseworker wasn't in this case. The caseworker had decided that that family had too many kids already and that they really were not appropriate. But we brought them in, we reevaluated the situation, and the child was eventually adopted by these people. And his behavior became not only controllable, became good. I mean, he's doing extremely well now, much better compared to how he had been doing when he was with these, this other family that he just didn't want to be with. But I don't know what would have happened if he hadn't come to court, because he wasn't, he just wasn't able to get it done by telling caseworkers, this is what I want. The caseworker said, look, I understand, but this is a perfectly good family here, and so you should really just stay with them. These other people have too many kids already. Well, so what, right? Plenty of people have big families. And as it turns out, this child fits wonderfully into that family, and it's because he had the opportunity to come to court. So it just makes me remember, that I really need to see these kids, and that it's wonderful when I do see them, because it helps me to make good decisions for them. So I'm grateful to have that opportunity.
And Judge, some of the other types of cases that you handle routinely, I think that adoptions certainly come before you a number of different times a year. Anything that you wanted to tell us about adoptions in that way? Are they, are they public and private, or there are certain different types of adoption?
Well, it
situations?
Depends. There are. Most of the adoptions that I do are adoptions of children who have been in foster care.
Okay.
And so that involves the Department for Children, Youth, and Families, the county.
Okay.
And then the children have been often in foster care for a long time before they can find a pre-adoptive home, which is to say foster parents who are willing to adopt if that becomes possible. And other times, babies are placed immediately with foster parents who can adopt them if that becomes a possibility. So we have all different situations. We're trying, as I said, so hard to reduce the amount of time that kids spend in foster care and get them to that place of adoption, because adoption is the goal when children are in foster care who cannot be returned to their parents, especially for younger children, of course. It's the goal. And it's a very happy day. And children are often, not often, they're always so excited to have it happen, because they've been a member of this family often for a long time. And finally, their name is changed to be the same as everybody else in the family. And they're now really, so-and-so's brother and really so-and-so's sister. And they're very happy, and it's a wonderful occasion.
It can be, too. And I know that the day that family court was dedicated by Judge Kay, then the Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals, I was there, and I was part of an adoption. And my client was there with their child, and they were part of the opening day ceremony, and it was a very happy time for their family as well. And so is at most of the situations there. Do you find the notion of if a child is older, it's harder to find a placement? Is there any statistical data to back that up, or is that just something thought of but really not supported?
It's supported. It is supported. As children get older, they are harder to place, and often they don't want to be adopted. That is another, that happens with older children. Children who are 15 or 16 sometimes decide they have had a biological family. They want to maintain contact with the biological family, but they can't live with those people. That the parents are not able to take care of them. So they'll often go into an independent living program, which is to say they'll start in a group group home, then they'll move into a more and more independent situation so that they are still supervised and they're being given skills. They take classes. They're taught how to do everything that people need to know how to do in order to support themselves and take care of themselves. So we have a lot of kids who do that, but that's a segment of the foster care population that I think needs a lot more attention because they are they're in jeopardy. They are able to run away. They're able to
Right. That's right.
yeah. They get involved in things that it's harder for kids to get involved in if they're in a family with people who are really watching out for them. So it's just a segment of the population that I think needs much more attention. So that's something we're going to be working very hard on.
Well, Judge, we're so fortunate to have you currently serving as one of our Albany County Family Court judges. And before that, of course, you enjoyed a distinguished career as an attorney for the City of Albany, also as a public defender here in the County of Albany, and had a full-time practice involving family law itself. And we're also fortunate that you continue to serve that way, not only the citizens of the town of Colonie, but also the entire county and state court system as well. We're so glad that you came today just to spend a few minutes with us about your very busy life as Albany County Family Court Judge.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. It was a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you. I'm Colonie Town Judge Peter Crummey, and thank you for joining me on Benchmark.